believe we are. Fantastic. Happy Friday, everyone. I'm excited to be here. This is another session of Innovators Live. We do this every Friday at 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time and 9 o'clock PT time. So please join us next time if you're available. This is a great session for us to talk anything related to R&D, any news related to financing. So bookmark us so you remember to come back. I'm Carlos. I am the Director of Business Development for Boast. I have my colleague here with me, Anastasia, the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Boast. We want to have a chat today about sources of capital. We have a lot of great questions and a good chat for you. I wanted to start, Anastasia, going over what's going on with the market today. So, as we know, market conditions are a little tough. Cash is king. Companies are weighing the cost of every dollar spent, right? So they're considering what to do, where to go. Any serial entrepreneurship will tell you that not all funding sources are created equal, right? So they're hidden pockets of funding in every stage of growth, right? So I think my first question, we have a lot of experience, being a director of an accelerator, so former director, so you have that experience, which is awesome. And we can chat about some capital strategy and creating saving cost areas. So first thing I want to ask, let's level set. What do we consider sources of capital? Can you give us some ideas or some examples of what that looks like?
Absolutely. And thanks for that, Carlos. Based on my experience working with companies directly when I run an accelerator as an advisor, I think first and foremost, it's easiest to bucket things into three different items, essentially. The first one that I always consider as sources of capital is or non-dilutive capital. We all know the equity path, but in terms of non-dilutive, the first one would be loan. That's the first pillar. This is your revenue-based financing. This is your term loans. This is your venture debt, all under loan. And then for the second pillar of non-dilutive funding is grants. And there is a misconception that grants is only largely available in Canada. That's not true. There are things that are called SBIRs in the US as well that companies, founders, even tech founders can actually access. And then the last pillar is tax credits. So this is your R&D tax credits or SR&ED in Canada and a bunch of other provincial and state specific tax credits. So if we want to do a level set for today's conversation, those are the three pillars that people need to remember. The first one is loan, the second one is grants, and the third one is tax credits.
That's awesome. And, as you know, we handle SR&ED, and we know that really well. It's a program that's been in place for decades, since the 40s. We can talk a little more about that later, but tell me a little bit about savings in terms of cost savings. There's obviously ways to get sources of capital through loan grants and so on, but how about savings? What companies can do? What have you seen out there in that space for that?
I love that you asked this question because I think when we think about capital efficiency, companies tend to think about how to get more non-dilutive and all that. This is great, but at the same time, you can also essentially extend your dollar further by not spending. When I say not spending, it's not that you don't use the tools that you actually need for your business, but if you think about your hosting costs like AWS, or Azure or Google Cloud. And then on top of that, you've got your typical payroll, bookkeeping, and benefits, all these things and communications tools, they all add up. If you think about your budgeting for the year, these are costly, especially as a startup. So once you are still in the MVP, getting into the early traction, early revenue, I highly, highly recommend joining an accelerator, incubator, any sort of associations like that. If anything, just to get access to these savings. Why? I know you might say I'm a serial entrepreneur, I'm a founder, I know how this goes, I don't need this. I'm yes, you might have the network already. You may not need the blueprint or the framework how to actually get your product to market because you've been there. That's awesome. But if you don't actually need the capital for equity that some accelerators do, just join accelerators that do not have equity portion to it. There is no cost. Government funding actually extends to a lot of these programs. So a lot of companies can join these accelerators for free. So when you do that, they have access to savings. We're talking about hundreds and thousands of dollars of
Yeah.
operational costs that you can save because you're not paying this out of pocket, because it is deeply discounted for members of the associations or the accelerators themselves.
That's
So
right.
that's definitely kind of like easily $100,000 to $200,000 that you can not spend now, and that's money in your bank.
I was going to say, in your experience, some of these tools that they can get access to, are they mostly free? Do they get a discount, a big discount, small? Like, what do you say? Is
I would say it depends on the company. Um, AWS would give you really, really good credits. Same thing with Microsoft, kind of like that would last you anywhere between a year to 2 years. Intercom and HubSpot would deeply, deeply discount kind of like the subscription fee for the first year,
yeah.
and then the discount can reduce slightly for the following year. So it depends on the company, but you can still save a lot.
Okay. Yes. No, I feel there's a lot of resources out there, and I think one of the reasons for these sessions is to kind of educate, help folks know what's out there. Feel free to book time with us if you ever have questions. Not related to what we do specifically, but just things like that. If you want to talk about it, find time with Anastasia and look her up. She can definitely help with providing insight into these things. Talking about sources of capital again, like how have you seen savvy entrepreneurs using sources of capital? Like, what are some of the things that they have done that have helped them save money and find the money that they need to develop their product, to grow, to expand their teams? Like, it's tough times right now. Interest rates are still high. It doesn't look like they're going down anytime soon. And so, what are some of the ways that are still available out there that people might not know that they can go and find some money?
Absolutely. I like to look at it more so as a general capital stack. So let's begin with when you're at the MVP stage, kind of like you have some sort of like beta product, you're gaining a little bit of traction. If you're in Canada, I would highly, highly recommend getting in touch with IRAP. You might have seen that there is some changes to how IRAP is structured, kind of like with the announcement of CIC. Please go back to our blog. There is a good write up about it, but IRAP program is still there, so you can still access it. That will help you offset the creation of your product. So like it's gonna help you with the product roadmap, cost related. So that's kind of like that would be one. And then kind of like once you're still in the MVP, you typically have your friends and family round or angel round or maybe like pre-seed round. This is your equity stack like within that MVP stage. And then while you're still at the MVP, this is like where I would recommend join an incubator, join an accelerator. That will stretch your dollar a little bit more. Once you get to early revenue, it's the same thing, kind of like you are still eligible for IRAP. You probably have some equity round from your VC right now, first institutional round. Your team is growing. You're spending more on your product development roadmap, which means that you are now eligible for R&D tax credits. In Canada, we call it SR&ED. So definitely claim the SR&ED. And if you need a little bit extra capital, definitely do SR&ED financing so you can actually access that earlier on. By the way, both can help with that. So that way, kind of like it help you with your cash flow. That will really stretch your dollar, especially when you couple with all of the savings that you did before from kind of like not spending on operational tech stack. So that's kind of like definitely the ones. And once your revenue is a bit more stabilized, once you hit, I would say, about 500,000 in annual revenue, then you can start looking into different types of loans as well, depending on the nature of your business, if you're SaaS, if you're enterprise, or the value of your contract. You can
Mhm.
look at revenue-based financing as well, and there might be kind of like other parts that you can add under the loan pillar that we talked about earlier into your capital stack as well. And as you scale, obviously, it will open up the different types of financial products that will be available to your company. So definitely talk to your director of finance or your financial advisor. When I say financial advisor, I don't mean kind of like financial advisor at your personal bank. Definitely talk to your maybe advisor who's a CFO or a VP of finance, because they can help you find the right financial product for you, whatever that might be. It could be revenue based financing, it could be term loans, it could be venture debt. Because once you get to that state, there is like a lot of different resources. And once you get to kind of like that early scale kind of like path as well,
Yeah.
if you're in Canada, I highly, highly recommend you to join the Lazaridi Scale Up program. I think kind of like the typical entry point for a lot of companies in the program is 2 million ARR, and they're
Okay.
really going to help you into kind of like the 8-digit like ARR sort of space. Same thing with C100. This really good group of people down, and it used to be just in the Valley, but now they're all over. They're in New York, Singapore, the UK, and that's essentially helping you open up kind of new markets by learning from people who's been there and done that. So there's like a number of different ways to like think about how you want to scale the company.
I love that path that you're describing. Like, sorry to interrupt, but I love that path. Like, if you're very early on, you can apply to IRAP and consider that, so you can get your product started. Once you have some expenditures in R&D, you have built a team, you're starting to develop your own work. Then you have the chance to apply for tax credit. I love that process where you continue to grow and different things along the way that you can take and do.
Absolutely, and I think kind of like tax credit is one of um, the easiest to access, and most often it could be kind of a little cumbersome to do, but rightfully so because like you're getting a lot of money back from the government. But the ones that I mentioned, like Shred specifically, it's only kind of like the federally known one. I didn't even include some of the provincial tax credits like in Canada that is also as lucrative. I think this is more your space. Can you share a little bit more about what those programs are?
Yeah, for sure. So I will start with one that has a big acronym called IDMTC. It stands for Interactive Digital Media Tax Credit. So it's basically what the name suggests. So a lot of companies that are working in a platform or a game or something that is interactive in nature. There's a lot of explanations online on what that actually is, the interaction piece. But it's a fantastic tax credit that you can use across most provinces. There's, I think, one or two that are not involved in the IDMTC. But for example, you can use some of the money that you get back for marketing dollars. Like you'd not think that that's a part of IDMTC, but it is. So if you have a game that you've built for, say, 2 or 3 platforms, iOS, Android, let's say a console, and you want to promote, those different platforms, promote your game, you can get money back on the marketing dollars that you spend, on the distribution that you spend, on the developers that actually were part of that program, or developing those games for these individual platforms. So very unique program. A lot of our clients that are in the gaming space are leveraging that and are getting a very good amount of money back from that. There's also a huge one in Quebec, the CDAE, which is the e-business tax credit. A lot of the companies that are in what the name suggests, again, in the e-business space, have a platform or have an e-business store. It's a very interesting program. It is very, I would say, similar to Shred in a way where you can offset some of your expenditures in R&D, but depends on what you're applying for, how many individuals you have on your team. There's some parameters and dependencies there. We would work with you to say, hey, you have a team of 6 individuals. This is how much you can get if you were to apply Shred to this, or it makes more sense for you at this point to apply for a CDAE. It's a very straightforward process. You apply for a certification. Once you're granted that certification, you just can submit that every year. If there's new developers that come into your team, you can include them, and it's great. We do all of those. And it's one of the largest ones in Quebec. A lot of companies established themselves there just to use it.
Amazing. Well, thank you for that, Carlos. I think that was very helpful. And if I can quickly summarize, then we talked about like the 3 pillars earlier, like loans and then tax credits and kind of a government grants. I think kind of we should also put like a phantom pillar, so to speak, that's kind of under cost savings. So that's why you don't have to spend money.
Yeah.
But kind of like 2 quick things like for everyone who's listening. One, if you're interested in kind of like more on the grants side of things, or essentially this is the government support funding program. We did a webinar just last month with one of our partners to kind of like talk about all the different things that you can access or covered by grants. So definitely check that out on our blog. The second thing too is like when we talk about cost savings, I talk about accelerators and things like kind of like that you can join. Just as an FYI, for those of you who are in Canada, Founder Fuel is now accepting application until Sunday. So if you are interested, please do apply or send me a message. I'll send you the link. So they are a very good program. They've been around for over a decade. Really good traction and alumni. Definitely check that out. And most importantly, they're one of the few programs in Canada that will still write you a check to be a part of the program. So definitely consider that as well. And last but not least, if you want to have access to some of these savings that we talk about, we have set up partnerships with some of these companies and have special discounts for you. Feel free to just let me know if you want to gain access to it.
Please do. Yeah. Reach out to us on LinkedIn if you have any questions. We can answer anything you might have. And if you want to just have a chat, learn about the space, what stage we're in, and if you need any help, we're here. Thanks, everybody. Pleasure to join here today. And make sure you guys stay tuned and bookmark so you can watch the next one next Friday. Take care.
Thank you, Carlos.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Bye now.
Bye-bye.